Shalom everyone, this is Yalak and it is September 28, 2017. This is another lesson in the New Testament is Fake series that continues to show in so many different ways from the scriptures that the Most High did not send this 2,000-year-old Messiah to die on a cross for Israel's salvation or to assist in any way with the restoration of Israel or to give a promise of restoration to Israel in any way, shape, or form. This is the New Testament is Fake series. This is lesson number 104. And this lesson I will title The Trick Prophets. Okay, this lesson is going to talk about the teachers who are teaching that the children of Israel should be serving this 2,000-year-old Mashiach who died on Calvary because he did not have the power to retain his life in the same way that the Elohim of the Hebrews was never seen to die. He was never challenged. In no way. In the Christian thoughts that the Jesus-type Hebrew teachers and Hebrew believers clearly subscribe to, but they will tell you with their mouth that they don't, but it's clear from their teachings of their beliefs in him and their use of the New Testament that they do. Well, in that Christian thought, it is said that there was a war in heaven at one point long ago and Satan was kicked out of heaven. I've taught you that there is no such Satan. That was a single being living up in heaven as an angel. But they say that he was kicked out of heaven because there was war in heaven. He was defeated. He was hurled down into the air and he was defeated. It seems funny that in that story, no angels died. And the important thing is that even though this Christ died on Calvary, who they say is God, that the so-called father of this Christ did not die himself when he was challenged by mighty angels in heaven long ago when Satan was cast out. So we see that each time there's any kind of telling based on the Bible about God being in some kind of war, whether he's defending himself or his angels in heaven with his power, or defending the Hebrews on earth as they were in battle with the Philistines and other groups of people, that this God never dies. He's never so threatened that he gives into death. But the one that you are taught to worship by the Hebrew camps, they teach that he died. There was something that was able to happen that let him die on a cross. So right there, he does not fit into the same category of a cannot die God of the Hebrews who created everything that we see, the heaven and the earth. So the creator is in a different category that this Justus Brutus Christus cannot fit into. These prophets who teach you that you are the children of Israel and you should return to the Most High through Jesus are lying prophets, like this prophet that I'm going to read to you about in the Tanakh. They hook you with a message that you are the Israelites. And because they give you a clear word that sounds good and you look into it and you find history matching that, yeah, we must really have been the Israelites, then you believe everything else that they say. But I have long known that just because someone teaches you one right thing does not mean they are right in everything else. The reason why I am rereading the Bible for myself, and I'm proud to do so, and proud and happy to say so, is that I've decided to look into the Bible to see what it says for myself. While I continue to learn from others, of course, because I want to test everything, right? As much as I'm able to do. Because I realized after leaving the Christian church with all its deceptions that the Hebrew teachers were doing the same thing. They were teaching you some things that were wrong, and that's not the main bad part. Because, hey, all of us are going to be wrong at some point. Every single one of us. The most well-studied of us, the greatest, well-known, most international rabbi will be wrong sometimes. It's just that in their case, that the rabbis, they've worked out a system now where they've covered over a lot of their errors from like 1,000 or more years ago, and they teach the same thing over and over with their corrections. So every rabbi regurgitates the same thing for the most part on the core doctrines of the Bible, so that they will all sound the same way. And it's usually in minor things, or a minor amount of things, that they will differ. So they sound the same kind of way. They don't want you to think for themselves, and it's the same with the Christian church and the same with the masses of Hebrew camps. They don't want you to think for yourself. And when I say the masses of Hebrew camps, in light of this video with the New Testament is Fake series, I'm talking about the camps that are teaching you to worship this 2,000-year-old Mashiach. They don't want you to think. You notice that there's a common thread with all of these teachers that come out of the early camps that teach us to worship Christ. They were somehow connected to people who found out where the Hebrews who were running Jesus type camps, because they came out of the Christian church and realized, oh, it's the truth that we're the Hebrews. So because the Christian teachings were still in them, they taught the message in a Christian kind of way with the New Testament. So you got the Hebrew teachings that were the Israelites mixed with the Christian teachings of the New Testament. So you got a blending of the two, and it continues. And all these teachers today that I have heard, they usually sound the same way. They have the same kind of teaching, the same kind of points, because they don't think for themselves. They choose the same verses in usually the same order for the most part. Now, of course, they're going to use the same verses. That's going to be their arguments, because if it's the verses in the New Testament and whatever, then how can we not use them? Yeah, but that's not what I mean. I mean, for the most part, they will order the verses that they use in their teachings in most of the same way. So if they're used to quoting 4 verses from the New Testament and then 1 verse from the Old Testament, that's how they usually do it. They'll quote 4 or 5, each one of them, and then slip in 1 from the Old Testament. Then they go another 4 or 5 from the New Testament, then 1 from the Old Testament. They have the same kind of system, and they order the same kind of verses in usually the same kind of way, so that certain verses are lined up a certain way, and then they throw in an Old Testament one, a certain number of verses lined up from the New Testament, from Paul, for example, and then they reach back for one from Abraham, and so on. And so it's ordered the same way. A thinking person doesn't do it like that. A thinking person might more mention something from the Old Testament and say, this is why I believe Christ, that whatever, and they're going to try to do it the way I'm saying now, so that they seem original, because they have to learn from a true teacher in order to pull off their deception, right? So you're gonna see them over time, the next 5 or so years, mixing it up and trying to sound original. But right now you can tell they all sound the same way, like they come out of what I have seen to be those original type of neo-ancient. All of these people who hate me, they can spam me, whatever, try to take my videos down or whatever. All I have to do is just start over and redo another channel. Why? Because if I was at 0 before for my very first video when I started this, if I start over, I will simply no longer be at 0 anymore. I will start to grow again. It's just simple. But the Most High says, who will rise up for me against the evildoers? In other words, who will make themselves vulnerable? Who will get shot at for me? Who will get spears thrown at them? Who will rise up for me? Who will get hit at and cursed and have lies told on them? Who will have the public think the wrong, mean, ugly things about them because they stood up and took a risk to speak my word? Who will do that, like Jeremiah stood out, and Ezekiel and all them, and people hated them, and like they tried to kill Jeremiah, and they spoke out against all these people who were speaking for them, right? Who will rise up for me and become vulnerable and become cursed by their brothers and sisters? Who will do that to speak my word? And they never rethought the whole thing. You hear these teachers talking about Christ is going to come in 2000 or whenever they said he was going to come. Listen, I was in the Christian church as a small boy, hearing in 1988 that Jesus is going to come. And then when that didn't happen, then they changed it to 2000 he's going to come. And now that I'm into this Israelite understanding, I heard that before I left the Christian church, it's the same thing. The prophet says that he's coming in 2000 or whenever they said he was coming. And it didn't come. You see? And yet still, the Bible says, don't listen to these lying prophets. And people are still listening to them. People are still listening to them. And you wonder why you are locked into the deception of worshiping this Christ. It's somehow you have been sneered because you continue to listen to the prophets that the scripture says, if they try to take you away, if they do some fancy things, some miraculous things, like they can draw lots of crowds and it looks like it's a move of God, that God has blessed that, but then they lead you to worship another God, for instance, Christ, do not listen to them. And so because you've continued to listen to them, it's like many of you are sneered and you cannot find it easy to break out of the Christ deception. And the miracle that they do, that the Most High says, if they work a miracle, it looks like a miracle to grab so many black people, tell them that they're Israelites and they're following and they're starting a branch camps now because they've outgrown where they're at and so on. There's like a miracle in your eyes and whatever. Oh, this is like a phenomenon. This Hebrew Israelite thing is growing. But you are snared and locked into the same deception of the same Jesus that you worship from the Christian religion. From the Christian religion. Tell me, people, if you have a car and you realize that, oh, this car has too much problems, it's just like, a lot of bugs from the manufacturer, and you realize people are doing whatever, and you see a lot of people complaining and now lawsuit and whatever because there are not enough recalls on this, that, and the other. From the manufacturer, even though it's very clear that there should be a recall for 3 or 4 issues that are big issues that might really take your car down. And you're like, man, before my car kicks into that, because you just had 2 other problems, you don't want the other 3 problems to kick in. You're like, I'm going to go and change my car. I'm going to just buy a different car. And you go back now to the manufacturer and you buy the same kind of car, but just in a different color. Let's say you had a blue car before and you bought a black one this time. But it's the same model, the same year car. Because they probably dropped off $2,000 off it or so because of the whatever in the news. So they try to sell it easier to entice you with the price. So you took it. Same model, same version, same year, same problems, same bugs. Do you have a different car? Technically, the idiot will say yes. But version-wise, model-wise, and problem-wise, do you have the same car in the eyes of the world? Yes, you do. And so these prophets of Baal snatched you with their loud street talking out of the Christian church, telling you you're worshiping a dying savior from the Christian church who is white, from the Europeans, and you come and you're worshiping the same black Jesus who is a same dying savior because he died as well on the same Calvary cross from the same New Testament, using the same New Testament verses to describe his death, and the same miracles they said he did, the same people that was around him, the 12 disciples, the same everything. Supposedly went up back into heaven in the same way, and he had the same apostles later on. So you changed the color from a European type color and description to a black African type looking color and person. And you say, I have changed my God. And you refuse to realize that you are driving the same kind of car. Because it's like the Most High said in Deuteronomy 28, they will enslave you and they will keep you in chains until they have destroyed you. The mind of the Israelite has been destroyed and you cannot realize you are driving the same car and you are about to have the same kind of problems. You got the same situation dealing with. Because the car didn't break down the same day you bought it or next month, doesn't mean that in 5 months or by next year, your investment is going to be driving you crazy because the same problems are going to come up again. Well, it was 5 major problems with the car. I had 2 of them, so I changed the car and I got back the same one. So you drove it for the first year and it was fine. But what when those 2 problems that you had creeps back in the following year and then the other 3 problems come on it as well? You got the same problem. But the mind of the Israelite is destroyed. The mind of the Israel. You know why the European countries and the white people around you thrive and do so well in general around you? The white people around you? Because they think different, they strategize, they see problems, they run in their businesses and so on, and they think about how to overcome this problem in the future. And when they pass on their business to their children, they teach their children how to avoid that problem in the future and so on. The Israelite with a destroyed mind sees the same dying Savior from the white Jesus in the Christian church, and they come and they take the same kind of Jesus in the Israelite churches that teach him about Hebrew, but just have him in a black form. And you don't see that you are living with a destroyed mind, a mind that does not function properly. So from 1 Kings chapter 13, and behold, there came a man of God out of Judah by the word of the Most High unto Bethel. So you see where this man is coming from? He's coming from out of Judah, like he's been sent. Unto Bethel. All right, and when you deal with Bethel, you're dealing with the house of God as well, too, right? So it's like everything looks right about this man, looks right about how the story starts as well. He's coming from a place dealing with the Most High. He's going to a place dealing with the Most High. This man isn't missing. He's not slipping. So he looks right. You can believe this man. He's a prophet. He's walking with the Most High. This man doesn't slip. And Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. And he cried against the altar in the word of the Most High and said, so he's crying in the word of the Most High now. He's speaking for the Most High. This man is not slipping. This man is moving. So you can be told you are an Israelite because everything looks right. You got the right scriptures. You got the Deuteronomy 28, the Leviticus 26. You got all the right stuff. You've got the Hebrew garments on. They tell you all kinds of history that they've studied with 15 books lined up around them and very large street signs and signs in their camps and so on. They can tell you every Israelite on earth where they went to and where they now live and so on. But there's a trap somewhere and you cannot see it because you are mesmerized. And that's how people chose wrong gods from ancient times. They were mesmerized by their leaders instead of listening to what the Torah actually said. Looking towards the Torah for themselves and searching it and digging it out. That's why the Moses says, teach your children what I say. Instead, people today are choosing what their leader said. When the Moses said, do not worship other gods. And it is very clear to everyone on the earth who has ever heard of Jesus that he is a God that is worshipped on the earth. And you got people who are Gentiles in other religions who don't even believe in this Jesus, who can tell you that this Jesus is fake. But the Israelite loves him. And said, O altar, altar, thus saith the Most High, behold, a child shall be born unto the house of David, Josiah by name, and upon thee shall he offer the priests of the high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burnt upon. All right, so he gave a sign, and so just to skip some verses, let me run to verse 4, skip one verse. And it came to pass, when King Jeroboam heard the saying of the man of God, which had cried against the altar in Bethel, that he put forth his hand from the altar, saying, lay hold on him. And his hand which he put forth against him dried up, so that he could not put it in again to him. So you see, there was some power there. This man was moving with the power of God, moving according to the power of God, so that the man coming against him, Jeroboam, the king's hand could have dried up. So there's power. Just like the false prophets, the false teachers, the trick prophets, they're going to look like they have some power and some unction from God to speak with their loud microphones and the fancy videos and everything that they do and the most impressive video software and everything and all the offerings that you give them and the tithes that you give them, even though they aren't priests and so on. They have all the nice things and they've got the baddest websites and so on, right? But his hand dried up. So now in verse 6, basically entreated the Most High, and the king's hand was restored to him again. So now in verse 7, and the king said unto the man, I guess because he prayed for him, he brought back his hand and so on by the word of the Most High. So the king said unto the man of God, come home with me and refresh thyself, and I will give thee a reward. And the man of God said unto the king, if thou wilt give me half thine house, I will not go in with thee, neither will I eat bread, nor drink water in this place. For it was charged me by the word of the Most High, saying, Eat no bread, nor drink water, nor turn again by the same way that thou camest. So he went another way, and returned not by the way that he came to Bethel. See that? So the Most High spoke, and he was following the commandments, the instructions of the Most High. He didn't go in, and he went another way. In verse 11, now there dwelt an old prophet in Bethel, and his sons. You hear that? An old prophet. Now first, this prophet obeyed the instructions of the Most High. He did not go in with the king. He went another way. Just like these trick prophets of Israel today, calling Israelites to return to the Most High, but they get you to worship the same Jesus from the Christian church. The same Jesus who the Vatican will tell you is the same Jesus, even though he's black. The same Jesus who in Islam they will tell you that's the same Jesus that black people are worshiping. The same Jesus. Right? It's the same Jesus. You just teach certain things different about him than the Vatican might teach or that Islam might teach and so on. But all these other religions and leaders of other religions know you're worshiping the same Jesus. You're just teaching him in your own way because you run an Israelite movement. So he obeyed and went another way. And that's like these trick prophets that are leading you the wrong way to worship this Mashiach. They don't give you the same Jesus. They just take you another way and say, look, he is actually black. Anyway, he goes on now. And in verse 11, now there dwelt an old prophet in Bethel. Notice it says an old prophet. The first prophet that came, the scriptures open up in at the start of the chapter saying a prophet. But they're telling you now this is an old prophet. They're letting you know, based on what he's going to do, that he's going to be able to pull off a deception against this first prophet because he is an old prophet and he is skillful. He is of neo-ancient camps. He is of neo-ancient teachings. He is skilled in the word of wisdom and in the knowledge of the Torah, so he can pull off any kind of deception to the one who is not paying keen attention to what the Torah actually says. He can dance circles around you. He is like the greatest of rabbis. He knows how to use the Torah to get the job done. This is an old, well-learned prophet. Notice with Eli, when Samuel was being raised up, when Samuel was being called, Eli, the light was going out in the temple and so on. Eli couldn't see properly. Eli looked like he was done and gone, so that it was Samuel who was doing the work in the temple now, because Samuel was now the one serving. So it looked like he was done for, like he wasn't doing the work anymore. But when the voice of the Most High came, Samuel, who was actually doing the work of doing the ministry, could not tell what was going on, but the old prophet Eli could tell this is the Most High. So this old prophet now, he is skilled and he can tell you everything that brother is saying in his New Testament is fake. He says, don't listen to it because look, I read 15 more books more than him because I've been around longer teaching this stuff. I got 5,000 people around me split up in different camps that has given me a start off in this new camp I'm running or in this new channel I'm running online. This brother Yalak, who is with him? Who stands with him? He don't got no support. He don't have nobody who raised him up. I got the support. I got many teachers from 50 years ago who passed it on to the other ones who are from 30 years ago, who passed it on to the other ones who have been running this camp for 25, 30, 15 years. I got support. I got backing. I got a whole group of people that tells that I'm authorized to do this. Yalak, he don't know anything. So an old prophet in Bethel and his sons came and told him all the works that the man of God had done that day in Bethel. Notice where he did it in Bethel, in the place where God was known to be. So it looks like God was moving all the time, like God's presence was there with the whole operation. So whether the operation is truthful or a lie is going to come in, it is a place where God is associated with. So it just looks right. So the words in Bethel, the words which he had spoken unto the king, them they told also to their father. Notice they told it unto their father, the head of the house, the leader, the teacher, the strong one, the one who had the Torah knowledge that young men will almost die to have. And you want all the years of his wisdom. But the scripture says that it's not based on who is strong and young and full of strength and so on, because even young men shall faint. and utterly fall, or something like that it says. But they that wait, they that endure, they that trust in the Most High and follow his Torah instructions, they are the ones who will rise. They are the ones who will succeed. They are the ones who will make it to receive the promises of the Most High. For even youth shall faint, and the young men, they utterly fall, but they that keep the Torah instructions, they reap the benefit in the end of the promises lined out in the Torah. So verse 12, and their father said unto them, what way went he? Just like some of these same Hebrew camp leaders who I hear have sold out to the white man and so on, they sit down just like the heathen do in Psalm 83, and they have consulted together. These same Hebrew teachers, they sit down and they decide and plan out together, and they slap their fat bellies and they slap their knees thinking, how can we take down that other teacher that's teaching against this Yahushua? How can we take down this teacher that's teaching against Yahushua? And they slap themselves and they laugh and they, ha ha ha, look what we did, look how we take them out, look how we're rising and so on. But there was a day when the Most High slapped his own knee as well, so to speak, and looked at Pharaoh, not knowing that Pharaoh was locked into the same kind of deception like these teachers are doing today. They're locked into their own fake teaching of deception. That's going to take them down like Pharaoh was taken down. The Most High himself laughed at one point at the Pharaoh, so to speak, as he drove himself in this frenzy of just doing what he felt to do. And one day he ran for a long time, but eventually the Most High got him in the right spot in the Red Sea and took the wheels off his chariots. That's what's going to happen to these lying trick prophets that are teaching the Israelites to worship a black Jesus. And so their father said unto them, what way went he? And that's what these trick prophets are doing when they're in their back rooms and their special places and their phone calls and their meetings. How can we take down this other teacher? How can we teach a lesson that will sabotage what they're doing? How can we teach another lesson that will steer people away from hearing the truth from these other brothers who are saying, do not worship the Most High, and from the sisters who are, do not worship Jesus, and from these sisters who are also teaching, because I've come upon some sisters who are teaching that this Jesus is a trick. And so they said, what way went he? For his sons had seen what way the man of God went, which came from Judah. And he said unto his sons, saddle me the ass. So they saddled the ass and he rode their arm. So they said, let's go after these teachers who are teaching us, who are teaching the people that Jesus, Yahushua, is fake. They go after them. And verse 14, and went after the man of God and found him sitting under an oak. Right, so I guess he's shoveling, he's probably taking a break now, a little rest, because it's, probably lots of walking or whatever. And he said unto him, art thou that man of God that came from Judah? Said, yeah, I am. You notice how he comes like the serpent in the garden? He don't come with no barrage of lies and trickery. Hey, I'm here to deceive you. Now he just talks a regular conversation. Did God say? Did that say? He just comes looking just normal and whatever, right? So he says to him, hey, are you the one that just came from Judah, that man of God? He said, yeah. So verse 15, then he said unto him, come home with me and eat bread. And the prophet now, sticking to what the Most High told him, and he said, I may not return with thee, nor go in with thee, neither will I eat bread nor drink water with thee in this place. For it is said to me by the word of the Most High, thou shalt eat no bread, nor drink water there, nor turn again to thee by the way that thou camest. Stop and listen and think for yourselves for a moment, Israelite man, Israelite woman. If the man of God at the start of the chapter from Judah came unto Bethel to give the word of the Most High, and we're told that Bethel deals with the house of bread, how come he cannot eat bread? The Most High told him, do not eat bread nor drink right there in the house of bread. So the Most High is telling you right there, if you apply this to all the false teaching that's out there, don't eat bread out of the place of false doctrines. Don't feed your soul out of the place of false doctrines. You should get up out of those lying camps. You should get up and move. At first, I never thought like that and I expressed that, but after a while, I started to change. I mentioned now, if they will not change, reform their thinking that the Most High said, you should get up and walk away from them before your destruction comes by the Most High. Do not eat bread in the place of bread, in the house of bread. If there's a house filled with bread and you need bread to the point where you're getting hungry and thirsty, why don't you eat there? Because the Most High said, if you're hungry, don't eat there. Don't feed from them, because they give you bread, but they butter it with poisonous doctrines. Don't eat from them. They are liars. I never sent them. Somebody supports them and pays them and directs them. And they worship a God your fathers did not know. They call him Yahushua, Yahawashai. So don't eat bread there, don't turn in and so on. Nor turn again to go by the way that thou camest. Do you see why I'm rereading the Bible for myself for the first in my life? Not by the way that thou camest. So the way you came, you go a different way. The way I came through Christianity, I'm going a different way now. The way I came into the Israelite teachings when I first came in and learned Israelite teaching to worship Christ, I said, no, I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to rethink this and travel a different way through the scriptures to find something else, because it don't seem right to me that I should worship the same Jesus with the same New Testament book as the Christians told me to do. New Testament is built for deception. So to change one or two little items and say he was actually black is built on deception. He says, don't go the same way that thou camest. Return a different way. Your problem is you want to go the same way as the lying camps with the trick prophets. You refuse to go a different way, and you are snared and locked into deception. And it's tougher when you have made so many friends in your strong cliques and your strong groups, and you can't break out because your heart is tied to your friends in those groups and not to the Most High. But you say you are a set-apart Hebrew. What set-apart Hebrew chooses their friends more than the Most High? And because you're paying for their websites and paying for this and donating for that monthly and so on, or periodically, you feel you can't lose, because if you do, they're telling you, oh, well, who's going to pay for this? It's going to fall down and so on. And you support a system that the Most High says is unrighteous. So when your judgment comes in the end, the Most High is going to know you paid to build and to support something that was wrong against my word. So verse 18, he said unto him, I am a prophet also as thou art. So you hear the lying prophet now? He came first speaking the truth like the serpent in the garden. He came sounding like he was moving for God because he was an old prophet. So he came in truth at first. He came with the charisma and the wisdom of an old experienced prophet, looking like he could run the baddest camp in Judah. And he says, I am a prophet also as thou art. In other words, we are the same. I'm the same as you, Israelite man. I'm the same as you, Israelite woman. But I found out that it's a black Jesus and not a white Jesus. Come over here and worship with us and learn and let us teach you the way of the way of Yahawashai. So he says, I am a prophet also as thou art. And an angel spake unto me by the word of the Most High. I got a revelation from God that he is black and not white. The Europeans painted him white. Bring him back with thee into thine house. So he's saying that Moses says, bring him back with thee, that he may eat bread and drink water. But he lied unto him. Why? Because he was a trick prophet. He was an old experienced prophet who knew how to twist the truth, who knew how to twist the scriptures and make Genesis line up with New Testament, and make Daniel and all the other prophets and so on line up and so on with the book of Matthew and whatever, right? Makes Daniel's prophecy 69 weeks and 70th week and so on line up with Matthew chapter 1 and Luke chapter 1 and so on, right? They know how to get it done. Right? But he lied unto him, just like they. And when we're writing this stuff in the future, when we're restored now, we're going to write the chronicles of our time in Babylon, and we're going to say, of those trick prophets out on the street teaching our people to worship this black God, we're going to say, but they lied unto our people. So 19, so he went back with him and did eat bread and drink water and so on. So he went there. And then now, in the end now, it basically says that he says, you have disobeyed the Most High. So judgment came unto him and then he died. Judgment came, right? So you see what happens now? In the end, the word of the Most High came, because this was a word of, this was a word of judgment. Just say, you should not have come in because the Most High told you don't. Don't turn in to eat bread here. So judgment came. So what happens is that in the end, the prophet who disobeyed found out later on that he obeyed the wrong instruction. But even though he was a prophet of God also and knew the Torah, he did not find out that he was going the wrong way until it was too late. So it is that many of our people will not find out that it is wrong to worship this black Messiah until it becomes too late. But they were in the real Hebrew garments. They said this is exactly what they wore in ancient times. They had all the fringes on and whatever. I mean, they were raking in lots of people just like they rake in lots of money. They do all this stuff. They were on the radio. They did all this stuff. How could it have been wrong? But you find out at the end. And that's a precept that you find in scripture often, that when judgment comes on people and it is their end, that's when they realize that something was wrong all along at the time when they thought it was right. Because the mind, the ear, the heart that refuses to peruse the teachings of the Torah, to dig in for themselves and to go by exact instructions, those people are led astray and get their judgment in the end. If we talk about, even from the Christian church, and I find the Christians are the same like the Hebrews, want to give me back that old time religion. So now Hebrews hear all this discussion and fighting about worship this Messiah or not worship this Messiah, messianic or non-messianic, all that kind of Old Testament or New Testament. Well, it seems to me simple. If you can't solve the problem, then why not just let's go back to original instructions. What was there first? And since we can't tell in our captivity, some of you anyway, because I can tell, if we should worship this Messiah or not, let's just go back to what the Hebrews were doing before they fell. Because if they were right before they fell, because they went astray, then that part we know is right. And at that part, when it was right, they were not worshiping any Jesus, even if you say Jesus appeared to them to give a small sentence. Right? So at that point, you know they were right, but they never bowed down to worship him, even if you say it was him that appeared, but it was not him, of course. So if when Jesus comes, he is in a cloud of discrepancy and arguments and so on, it's simple. A wise person will get out of the cloud of confusion and go back to the time when there was no confusion, when there was no strange God among you, like the scriptures teach. But Israelites have a lot of fluff, have a lot of words, but they don't have it in their heart. You got a lot of big fancy words, but you can't go back to the truth. So he died. Now look here. The same Jeroboam who tried to fight against the prophet of the Most High and got his hand damaged and then his hand was repaired and so on. After the prophet now was killed for his refusal to obey the Most High. Now it says here in verse 31 to 34. Well, actually, look at this, verse 31. And it came to pass after he had buried the prophet, that he spake to his son, saying, When I am dead, then bury me in the sepulchre wherein the man of God is buried. Lay my bones beside his bones, for the saying which he cried by the word of the Lord. And that's what these people are saying, who tell you, don't follow these teachers, don't follow Yalak or whatever. He's a lying prophet. In their heart they go, they lay down, and they look at each other and they say, damn, this brother is good. And they're like, oh, these teachings are good. And they look at us and they're saying that, these brothers, man, they're really teaching the truth that we shouldn't be worshiping this Messiah. And they say to themselves and among each other and in their heart, they say, man, these teachers are good. These teachers are right. But they're not going to tell you publicly that because they want to lead you astray. But they admit it to themselves, right? They admit it. Right? And it's like the prophets here saying now, yeah, this prophet lay my bones. I deceived him as well because he didn't follow the instructions of the Most High. But I know he was the true prophet. So lay my bones beside him. You see that? So even though he deceived the prophet, he's like, damn, I know that man was right. Bear me beside him. Verse 32, for he's saying, for the saying which he cried by the word of the Most High against the altar in Bethel, and against all the houses of the high places which are in the cities of Samaria, shall surely come to pass. After this thing, Jeroboam returned not from his evil way, but made again of the lowest of the people. Again he did that. Made again of the lowest of the people priests of the high places, whosoever would he consecrated. You see that? So the Most High wasn't choosing the priest now. Whosoever wanted to be a priest, he would just consecrate them and set them up and so on. And this thing became sin unto the house of Jeroboam, even to cut it off and to destroy it from the face of the earth. The chapter is ending with a kind of precept that shows you when they refuse the original instruction of the first prophet in the chapter, the end becomes one of transgression. In other words, when you don't follow the prophet that brought the true word, your end still becomes the same. And so the chapter ends in the same way that Jeroboam started out, with deception and transgression, because they refused to take on the true teachings of the Most High from the first prophet he sent. So Jeroboam's end was the same, and that's how you're going to end up if you don't leave these trick prophets alone, who are teaching you to worship Christ just because they teach you you are the Israelite. So he made again these fake priests. He chose of them of the lowest. In other words, by making of them priests of the lowest of the people, people who were not chosen and consecrated by the Most High, he perpetuated false doctrine in Israel. And that's why you and I are still dealing with it today, fighting against these false doctrines, because our forefathers did not always make the right choice to cut off the transgressions, to cut off the false priests, to cut off the lying teachers and the lying prophets and the trick prophets out of Israel. They did not cut them off, and so you struggle with it today, and the Most High allowed you to be snared into false teachings, because your forefathers and my forefathers made the wrong decision, and you have not learned even to this day, because many of you are still listening to the choices, teachings, and following the choices of people like Jeroboam, of leaders like Jeroboam, who set up other lying leaders, other lying teachers, other lying priests, other false teachers. You're still listening to those kinds today. The only difference between Israel back then in Old Testament times and Israel now is not captivity necessarily, because they were in captivity in Old Testament as well. The only difference now really is that the kingdom has been fully dismantled, taken down, and we are living in modern times, whereas they had the kingdom fully taken down as well, and they had to rebuild and so on, but they were just in old times. The only difference really is that they were in old times, we're in modern times. They rode horses and chariots and so on, pulling donkeys. We drive motor cars. That's the only difference. We're just in modern times. But the heart of the Israelite in large part is still the same, where we say with our mouth we love the Most High, but we live in a way where our mind chooses something against His word. Exodus chapter 20 verse 3, he says, do not choose any other God. So I'll read verse 1 to 3 from Exodus 20. And the Most High spake all these words, saying, I am the Most High, thy power. So he's saying only him alone. I don't have anybody working with me, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt. So I didn't have no Jesus as an angel that walked you through the wilderness, walked you out of Egypt in the wilderness and so on. I brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. How come the Most High never tells you that Jesus brought you out, that his son brought you out, his son Jesus? He never tells you that. All these times he's declaring, and he doesn't give like 5 or 6 verses saying, my son brought you out. He keeps saying, I. But the lying prophet on the street today with fancy Hebrew garments running the biggest of camps tells you, Yahushua did it. And the mind of the Israelite that is destroyed cannot see through the lie. And thou shalt have no other worshipful one before me. Thou shalt have no other Savior before me. Thou shalt have no other world-renowned deity before me. Thou shalt have no other Roman-loved deity before me, Roman-created deity before me. Thou shalt have no other God that was loved and emphasized in the Roman Empire before me. Thou shalt have no other God emphasized by the Vatican. Thou shalt have no other God before me. Get away from the trick prophets and return to the instructions of the Torah. I hope you do.